There are plenty of reasons to dislike the Netflix Witcher show, from poor writing, generic visuals, terrible casting, character butchering, and even a complete misunderstanding of Witcher lore, or in some cases, even a disdain for that lore. But there is another thing that really bothers me about the show, and that's science. There's a real issue with the Witcher swords, and this is something that Netflix just doesn't understand. I know. I think we can all agree to suspend some disbelief while watching a fantasy TV series, but just hear me out. First, who am I, and why does what I have to say matter? Well, hey, I'm Zach, and I'm a mechanical and aerospace engineer who's dabbled in knife making and bladesmithing for the past 10 years. I've also spent the last 10 years of my life falling in love with The Witcher, and that timeline is no coincidence. When I first got into The Witcher, the YouTube channel Man at Arms Reforged made a set of game-accurate Witcher swords, and I was then determined to learn bladesmithing, and I was hooked on all things Witcher, from games, books, and comics, and even briefly the show. Yeah, that one. Definitely not this one. Believe me, I could go on and on about why I dislike the show, and how this adaptation doesn't represent the fantasy universe that I fell in love with. And honestly, I'm sure my wife in the next room over is tired of hearing about it. So what's wrong with the swords? Do they not match the books or the games? Or are they used incorrectly in combat? Well, yes and no. Listen, I am by no means an expert in swordplay nor medieval warfare, but I do know a thing or two about science, engineering, and Witcher lore. Have you ever watched a movie mess up something that you really understand? Like someone hacking by typing random nonsense into a Word doc? Or like a motorcycle with the wrong audio dubbed in. Or maybe when you hear a safety go off on a Glock. And you're just sitting there thinking, yeah, that's not how any of this works. That's me every time I see a glowing sword swinging around in combat. I mean, it does look cool. I'll give you that. But once you understand how steel behaves, it's actually painful. In order for swords to be effective, they need to be hard enough to cut, pierce, and hold a good edge, but also ductile enough to flex and bend and return to its nominal shape. This delicate balance has been mastered over the past several hundred years. To get this desired effect with the sword, it must be heat treated, or you really only have a sword-shaped object. When you heat a sword to a high enough temperature to see it glow like you see here, here, or even here, not only do you make it unusable in combat, but you ruin this expertly crafted weapon. A hot sword would act very differently in combat, more akin to a wet noodle, and imagine trying to fight with that. To understand why a blade would be ruined even after it cools, let me explain heat treating and what happens to the steel through that process. There's a lot that goes into making a sword, and for this explanation, we're just going to be looking at steel swords. And yes, even Witcher silver swords are steel swords, they just have some silver on them. Even the edges are steel. Read the books, you'll figure it out. First, to get the desired shape and style of that sword, you're going to start with forging. Forging is when you heat up the steel until it's softer and you can hammer it into the desired shape. Once you're finished forging, this is where you get to the first heat treat steps. The first one, normalizing. Normalizing is when you heat the blade to just above a critical temperature and then let it cool in ambient air. Forging causes internal stress, uneven grain, and forms carbides. These are bad. Normalizing relaxes the steel, evens the grain structure, and even helps dissolve carbides to prepare for later heat treatment steps. Next is kind of an optional step called annealing, and this is softening the blade for further work that needs to be done. Heat the steel, allow it to cool very slowly, sometimes in an insulating material like ash or vermiculite. This makes the steel softer and easier to refine to the final shape prior to hardening. The next step is called austenitizing. This is when you heat the steel to a specific high temperature, around 1450 to 1500 degrees Fahrenheit, depending on the type of steel. You do this until the internal structure turns into what's called austenite. This phase change is necessary so the steel can harden properly during the quench, the next step. Now, quenching, or sometimes referred to as hardening. This is rapidly cooling the steel, typically by plunging it into heated oil, around 120 to 140 degrees Fahrenheit. The fast cooling locks the steel into a hard but brittle phase called martensite. The blade can now hold an edge, but it is also very brittle and could snap if used like this. After quenching, you have a little bit of time to straighten the blade from any warping during the quenching process. Once the blade cools down, it's a lot harder to fix, and you may even have to redo a bunch of steps. At this point, now imagine fighting with an uncooked spaghetti noodle. After that, you have tempering. This is when you reheat the hardened blade to a lower temperature, usually around 350 to 400 degrees Fahrenheit, for a desired time, and you do this in multiple cycles. This step reduces brittleness and adds toughness while keeping most of the hardness. This gives us a balance of strength, durability, flexibility, the perfect sword. After that, you're ready to finish the blade. Put it through its final grinding, polishing, put the guard handle pommel on, and you have a sword. I simplified a lot for this video scope. If you'd like to dive deeper, I'd highly recommend checking out Dr. Laren Thomas at Knife Steel Nerds and The Efficient Engineer on YouTube, and I'll link their websites below as well. So now you understand the basics of how a sword is properly heat treated. Now, what happens if that perfectly crafted blade gets hot enough to glow again? Well, remember the stages of austenitizing, quenching, and tempering? When a sword reaches those high temperatures again, you've essentially undone all of that work. The steel loses its hard structure and reverts to a softer, more ductile state, too weak to hold an edge or even maintain its shape. This state is called ferrite, for all my nerds out there. So what does this mean for our Witcher swords? And I know I can hear you saying, well, maybe the swords are just magic. Actually, no. Contrary to popular belief and what most people assume, Witcher swords are not inherently magical. In the books, Witchers let people believe that they're magical as a way to build fear, maintain mystique, and discourage thieves or amateurs from trying to use them. This is especially clear in Season of Storms, the 8th Witcher book by Andrzej Sapkowski. This book is set as sort of a side story to the short stories and later the saga. Early in the story, Geralt's swords are confiscated at the city of Karakin, and a huge part of the plot revolves around him trying to retrieve his swords. There are many moments where Geralt spreads myth about Witcher swords to deter thieves, all while telling Dandelion, or us, the audience, that Witcher swords are masterfully crafted weapons, but not magical. May I warn you in advance that my swords are protected by powerful spells. Only Witchers can touch them. Others will have their vitality drained away. It mainly manifests in the loss of male potency. And when confronted as to why he doesn't have his swords, it's no wonder you can't see them, because they're invisible. Haven't you heard the legend about Witcher swords? The uninitiated can't see them. They appear when I utter a spell, when the need arises, if one arises. And while Dandelion is ranting about being so close to a set of Witcher swords this whole time while he's in Geralt's company, worrying that his potency may be affected, Geralt reassures him that it was only a myth. Damn it, Geralt, now you tell me. He says, relax, Dandelion. The impotence thing was nonsense. I made it up on the spot, hoping the rumor would spread, that the thief would take fright. And later in the books, while discussing more about the swords with Dandelion, steel smelted from a meteorite, and also blades forged of such steel, contain a great deal of elements. It's magical. The entire sword is magical. Do you understand? Dandelion replies and says, certainly. Now back to Geralt, he says, so forget it. It's poppycock. What? Poppycock? Fabrication. Don't tell anybody. So I ask you to keep your trap shut. Promise? Have it your way, I promise. And of course, Dandelion being Dandelion, he writes about this secret in his book titled Half a Century of Poetry. So there we have it. Witcher swords are not magical, but they are masterfully crafted monster hunting tools. But even masterfully crafted swords cannot overcome material science. Okay, so what about the games? The swords are magical there, right? I would argue yes, but there's an important difference. CD Projekt Red took some artistic liberties with the source material here, but they made a great game, one that millions of people love, and I'm sure if you're watching this video, you probably love it too. And their changes actually do fit into the Witcher world. The way I look at it, the glow, the runes, the fire, that's mostly a visual shorthand for enchantments, oils, signs. It's not showing actual magical blades. It's a way to tell the player, hey, now your sword's going to be dealing a different type of damage, rather than rewriting what actual Witcher swords are. So yeah, it's not a perfect one-to-one to the books, but it's understandable from a game mechanics perspective. The key thing here is this adaptation is a respectful adaptation, and that's a big difference. All right, so I'm not just going to leave Netflix in the dust here. What could they have done differently to make this better? I mean, I think we all know the simplest answer. Adapt the books properly. Now let's go back to the first time we see Henry Cavill's Geralt use Igni to heat up his sword in the show. In that scene, Eskel is cursed by a Leshen or Leshy and tries to kill Vesemir. Geralt hesitates to save Vesemir because he doesn't want to kill Eskel, his friend and fellow Witcher. This is already an emotional moment, but imagine if the show had leaned into that more. What if he used Igni knowing that it would destroy his sword? That choice would have carried even more weight, showing that he was willing to sacrifice his most trusted tool, his Witcher blade, to put down a friend he cared for and to save good old Uncle Vesemir. And here's the thing, Kaer Morhen Forge, the only one authorized to make and sell game-accurate Witcher swords, he made a few for the show. I saw this in the trailer and I saw him post about it on social media, and I was very excited. I was so hopeful to see Henry Cavill's Geralt wield one of these works of art. And this would have been the perfect setup to introduce a new game-accurate Witcher sword. I mean, talk about fan service. Maybe less so since Netflix killed off a fan-favorite Witcher, but I digress. Hey, Karamore and Forge, if you're listening, I would totally rep your swords. Honestly, after that, I don't see much reason to heat your swords like it's a party trick. Even in the Season 4 trailer, he does it again, and this time it's to fight some run-of-the-mill monster we see. At least the first time kind of made sense within their version of the lore, since the Leshy could only have been killed with fire touched its heart. It's not book accurate, but at least there was some internal logic. And now this time in the trailer, it's just like, hey, look, glowing sword, this was cool last time, let's do it again. Bottom line, the games are great. The third one is goated. More than 10 years later, and I'm still all about it. I'm actually on another playthrough as we speak. The books are fantastic. I'm reading the newest one now, and I can't wait to finish it. They even help me enjoy the games even more, which is just amazing.
And they fuel my hatred for the show.
Now, making swords is a lost art to most audiences, and I understand that. We've moved past that as a society. Now they're just kind of neat to have. But for one, I feel so lucky to have this universe at its peak during my lifetime, and I cannot wait for The Witcher 4. In this house, we are Team Ciri, and Ciri is the only protagonist that makes sense in the next Witcher game. Make sure you like, comment, share, subscribe to earn all of your XP to level up. Thanks, everybody.
Well, you're fucked. Ha 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 ha.
Is that a Witcher?
Pamparam, pamparam. What now, you piece of filth? Looks like rain. So, what's wrong with the game? Nothing. Fuck.
Wind's howling.
Come on, Roach. Adapt the books properly, Lauren.